Right, hey there. Not the best angle, but anyway, here goes. Today I'm going to be making Spanakopita, which is a traditional Greek dish that has phyllo pastry with spinach and feta cheese. You can buy phyllo pastry from the bakery, so you can buy it in the fresh food section. You can also buy it in the freezer section. I always find buying it fresh a bit better because it's such a fine pastry. When you buy it frozen, sometimes it sticks together. But today I'm actually going to show you how to make phyllo pastry. It's pretty easy to make considering sometimes how hard it is to actually work with. But years ago I used to work for a Greek bakery and we used to make this all the time, every day. It was one of our most popular sellers, so I'm going to go through it with you. So phyllo is an unleavened dough, so that means it doesn't have yeast in it, and it's used for pastries and things like baklava, galaktobuliko, spanakopita. Phyllo pastries are made by layering many sheets of phyllo brushed with oil or butter, and when the pastry is baked, it sort of has all these beautiful flaky layers. A bit of history about it. It was, I'm just having a bit of a look here. So as I said, the Greeks, the Turkish, a lot of different of those type of cultures use it. It's made with flour, water, a small amount of oil. Homemade phyllo takes a bit of time and skill, and it's done in stages, and it also requires you to roll it out very thinly at the end process, but I will show you how to do that. When using phyllo, the thin layers add to the final thickness of the actual pastry, which is what I will show you eventually. Okay, so I will go through what we need to do. So the first thing we're going to need is 500 grams of plain flour, or you can use bread flour, either's fine. 500 grams of plain flour is actually 3 cups. So you don't need to sift the cups of flour, but you do want to make sure that you put in a nice level amount. And as I said, I'm putting 3 cups in, so I'll catch them in. I'm also putting in a tablespoon of salt. I don't have any normal cooking salt, so I'm just using some Himalayan rock salt. I really like that, it has really nice flavour. And then what I'm going to do is add 1/4 cup of oil. So phyllo pastry doesn't have butter in it like traditional pastries do. We actually use oil in this, so the oil helps it keep its elasticity, it helps keep it nice and soft, gives it a really nice flavour, and it's good for you, olive oil, which is a good thing. So then I'm going to add 200 grams, oh, that's what I forgot to add. I've got to add a tablespoon of white wine vinegar. So the white wine vinegar helps with activating everything as well, gives it a little bit of that sort of sharp flavour. And then I'm slowly going to add in my 200 mils of water. So as you're mixing it, if it feels as though it's still a bit firm, before you get it totally mixed, you want to make sure that you've added enough water. Now you don't want the dough too sticky, but you don't want the dough too hard. It needs to be nice and soft. So better to add a little bit too much water than not enough, because it's easier to mix it in beforehand than afterwards. And then what you can do is add a bit more flour to it if it's too sticky. Now this feels really good now, so I'm just using one hand to mix it, and I'm using my other hand to turn the bowl around, because I find if I use 2 hands to mix my dough, I end up in a really big mess. So it's really good to try and get into the habit of using one hand to turn your bowl and the other hand to mix your dough. So this has come together really nicely. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is take it out of my bowl and just getting all the excess, and then I'm just going to knead it just for a little bit, just to make sure my dough is nice and smooth. The elasticity in it I can feel, which is really good. It's got a nice stretch about it. You want to work it a little bit. All I do is bring the sides in and then use my thumbs to roll it. All right, now what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to spray my bowl with a bit of cooking oil. Pop my dough in. Now this dough won't rise because it doesn't have yeast in it. It's not a self-raising flour, and we don't want it to rise at all, because the whole process is about layering the Filo pastry to get those layers and to get it to rise in that way by having lots of layers. So I'm just going to cover it with some Glad wrap, and I'm going to let it sit for about half an hour just to rest, and then I will come back and show you the next stage. Alright, I'm going to make the filling while I'm still waiting for my dough to soften and sit for a bit. So I'm going to add 1 onion. Now I'm adding more than what is on the recipe because I'm obviously making a lot more than what you guys are going to make. So I'm just going to peel the onion and I'm going to slice it and dice it. I'm going to add it to my saucepan with some frozen spinach. I've just got frozen spinach out of the freezer section. You could use fresh spinach, but I find with fresh spinach it shrivels up to not much, so it's easier to buy frozen spinach because you get a lot more of spinach. So I've just bought it in blocks like this. In there I've also put some garlic. I've added some garlic. I'm also going to add some salt and pepper. And once my spinach has defrosted and it's cooked a little bit, I'm then going to take it off the stove and I'm going to add some eggs to it. So I'm just throwing this all into the pot, and then I'm going to pop it on the stove to cook. So I'll bring you over here. You guys realise that your voices are going on there? Sorry about that. My family is talking. So I've just put this on medium. I'll pop you up a bit higher so you can see. I'll pop you on top of the saucepan. Alright. So, like I said, my spinach is frozen, so I've just put it on medium heat. And I'm just going to give it a good stir. It won't take long for the spinach to melt down. I'm also going to add a bit of salt and pepper. Bit of pepper. And then you could add fresh herbs to this. You could add some basil, you could add some dill. You could really add whatever you like to this, I guess, the flavour-wise. So it's starting to sort of melt down a little bit from the heat. Hopefully you can see that. You'd rather look at that than look at me. While that's mixing up, the other thing I'm going to crumble through it is some traditional feta. I find the Lemnos feta is really nice. You can buy the smooth and crumbly. You can buy the traditional crumbly and tangy. I've got some crumbly and tangy feta here today. And I'm just going to open up the packet if I can. I'm just going to grab a bowl. And it comes in a block, and I'm just going to crumble that into the bowl. I'm not going to pop it in my hot mixture while it's cooking because I don't want the cheese to actually melt. It will crumble and melt as we cook it in the oven. So if you have a look at that, that's a nice crumbly type of cheese. Quite salty, but tastes pretty good. And I've got 2 blocks, again because I'm making a lot more than the actual recipe says. So I'm just going to crumble that all up. Wash my hands in between because you want to keep your hands nice and clean. Alright, this is starting to mix up nicely. I will come back and show you a bit more soon. So, I have cooked up my spinach in here. I've added, as I said, my onion, my garlic. And then in here I've crumbled up my feta, as I showed you, and I've popped in 6 eggs. Remembering again, my recipe will be a bit different to your recipe. Because I'm making a lot more than what you guys are. I've just mixed my cheese and my eggs in here, and I'm going to pop them in with my spinach. I'm just going to give it a good mix, alright? The egg is what's going to help everything set as well. So I've got a nice big pot, and it smells beautiful, of spinach and the feta and the egg all mixed in there, ready to go. Alright, with my dough, it's softened up beautifully. And what I'm going to do, you can see that, it's got a really nice stretchy texture about it, is I'm going to roll it, I'll pop that down, into a long dough. And I'm just going to wipe my knife. I'm going to cut it in the middle because I want to cut it into even balls. So I'm actually going to cut this, cut it in half, in half again, and then I'm cutting each half into a third so that I've got these nice balls. So a couple of them are a little bit bigger than the end ones, so I'm just breaking off a piece of dough, and now I've got these nice balls. I'm cupping my hands and I'm using my fingers to push in on them so that I can roll them into nice balls that are nice and smooth. Alright, so when I used to work at the Greek bakery years ago, we used to make thousands of these of a morning. So we'd all be in there at 3 in the morning and we'd make mass batches of Filo pastry, and then we'd stand there and roll them all like this. So done the old traditional way. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to cover these with Glad wrap because you don't want them to dry out. So by covering them with Glad wrap, you keep them nice and soft and they won't dry out. Now, in the recipe that I've got to make traditional Filo pastry, it says to use flour, corn flour, when you're rolling your dough out. But in the bakery, we used to use like an oil. So we used to do it a little bit differently. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to spray my bench with a bit of canola spray. I'm going to pat my ball out, and I'm also going to pop some canola spray on top. I'm going to grab my rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, you could use your Glad wrap roll. That's always a good thing to use. And I'm just going to keep rolling this out until it's nice and thin. And what happens is the oil on the bench stops it from sticking as well. And I think it also stops it from drying out. If I used flour or corn flour on this, you would find that it would dry out a lot quicker. So I find that using canola spray when you're rolling it out is better. Now, if you can see that, it's starting to get a really thin texture about it. And you can stretch it out like this. The main thing is to make sure that you don't break it, because it actually is quite easy to break. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a baking tray. And I'm just going to give this a bit of a spray, because again, I want to keep it nice and soft. Now, to get my layers with this, I am actually going to fold this over, and then I am going to pop this in my baking tray. And I'm just going to work it out a little bit. And that's the first layer. All right, I'm actually going to put another layer on it, and then I will put some spinach on there. So again, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you could do this too. So again, spray the bench with canola spray, roll your pastry out with your rolling pin. Try and keep it in the shape that you want to use. So a square shape is what I'm trying to do. As I said, it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of practice, but hey, you know what? If you don't have a go, you don't know whether you've done it or not. And you can just stretch your pastry out using this as well once it's thin enough. Okay, so I'm just stretching this out as thin as I can possibly get it. So you want to be really gentle with it, because it does take a bit of effort and a bit of work. All right, so now that I've got that stretched out nicely, I'm going to give it a bit of a spray. I'm going to take the bit that I popped in the bottom of my tray, and I'm going to pop that in the middle. All right, now what I'm going to do is spoon some of my feta in the middle of that. So I've spooned my feta filling in the middle, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over like this and fold the ends in. All right, and then I'm going to pop that back in my tray. All right, and then I'm going to pat it out a little bit, like that. Actually, yep. And then I'm going to pop that, put a couple of little holes in it, and I'm going to pop that in the oven and cook it so that you can see what it turns out like. All right, the other thing I thought I'd have a go at is making a feta roll. All right, so with this one again, your cooking spray so that it helps you roll it out. These are turning out far better than what I ever thought they would. As I said, it's been a very long time since I have made them, but I'm pretty excited. All right, so this I'm going to make long, sort of about that, and I'm just going to move it up here a little bit. And because the dough is so stretchy and it'll stick to your bench because you've got the cooking spray on there, you can spread it out really nicely. And again, spray it with a bit of cooking spray to keep it soft while you roll out the next one. So you kind of got to work a little bit fast because you don't want them to dry out, as I keep repeating myself. But it wouldn't be me if I didn't repeat myself. All right, again, so I want to get this one long. All right. So I'm actually going to layer this. If you were using Filo from the bakery, from the supermarket, it's really fine, so you'd probably need 3 or 4 layers. But because this has got a bit of a different texture about it, you actually only need 2 layers. So I'm putting 2 layers on here. All right, so they're spread out nicely. Now what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to run it a bit along like a sausage roll. So I'm putting my feta along there. Give my hands a bit of a wash. I'm going to spray my tray. And I'm actually going to roll this like a sausage roll. All right, so I've got my lovely 2 layers there. And then I'm going to roll that a little bit longer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it along so it kind of looks like a giant snail. So if you can see that there, looks like a giant snail. And I'm just going to pat that out. All right. Now you could put a bit of egg wash on top, but because I've got the cooking spray on it, to me it doesn't need any egg wash, but you could put egg wash on top. All right, I might make some more of those. So I'm going to make some more of these. I will cook them up and then I'm going to show you what they look like once they're cooked. Okay.